Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Krista Reed, and I'm the Director of Operations here at Accelerant Research. Very excited to introduce our next speakers for our Virtual Insights Conference. If you've been with us throughout over the course of the many Virtual Insights conferences that we've done, welcome back. If this is your first time with us, thanks for joining. A few rules that we're going to just go over before we get started. We are at the mercy of tech, so if there's a glitch, if there's an issue with the audio, just please bear with us. We'll be back. We'll get it worked out. Also use this opportunity to network, to engage, to speak with one another. I'm sure each of our speakers will be happy to follow up with you after each of their presentations. So take that opportunity to engage with them. And also just be kind and courteous in your comments with your questions, whatever input that you have. We greatly appreciate your feedback though. So we'd love to hear from you if you have any comments. So with that, I will introduce Laura and Benjamin, who are part of the UX research team over at Indeed.com. And I'll turn my camera off and my microphone off, and I'll hand it over to both of you. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks everyone for listening, and enjoy.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for having myself and Ben. Ben and I have been working at Indeed now for 5 years, and we've seen the organization evolve from a 3,000 person company all the way up to 15. And with that evolution has really come a lot of change, as you can imagine, burning platforms in terms of organizational design and change, product changes. And with that evolution, Ben and I have really helped the organization develop internal and external listening strategies. So when we talk about internal, it's with our employees, and then external with our customers actually engaging and using and investing in our products. So we're really excited today to be talking to you all about what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't, best practices, tips and tricks along this journey of really a growth organization. Ben and I both work on the voice of customer team, which sits in the sales and client success organization. We are both researchers. I focus on the qualitative side and Ben focuses on the quantitative side. And we work directly as a conduit to our customers, work with them directly and hear from them. We transitioned from a team around almost 2 years ago, where we focused on internal listening. So we truly have seen both flips of the coin of internal and external listening. And he and I have found a lot of synergies between both of those worlds. So Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and then we can dive in?
Yeah, sure. So as Laura said, that we're both on the VOC team. She does the qual, I do more of the quantitative side. We have a ton of experience working in both like internal listening strategy, or really developing those internal listening strategies sort of from ground up, where, you know, you don't have a ton of communications from internal members to your businesses, and how do we survey and how do we develop that sort of strategy. And really sort of the focus of this presentation is not only making a case for the synergies, as Laura said, between internal and external customer listening strategies, but also like how you should, in some regards, almost treat your internal customers like your external customers, and your external customers kind of like your internal customers. And so they're different kinds of customers, but there's a case to be made for treating both like customers, and we're going to show little tips and tricks on how to succeed in both.
Yeah, great. And please let us know if you have any questions throughout the presentation. We'll try and pause and answer anything that you may have. Again, as a reminder, there's no small or large or dumb or highly intellectual question. We're here to help you and let you know what's worked and hasn't. So let's move into our slides and we'll go from there. We'll start our journey together.
Yeah, so, but yeah, You want it? I can go. So thinking about like what are some of the key differences between internal and sort of our external customers. Obviously, it goes that being said, your internal customers are the people that sort of work for you. I love this sort of Richard Branson quote. It's something that we kind of carried in our hearts when we developed our internal listening strategy. And it's, take care of your employees, you'll take care of your business. As simple as that. So taking care of another quote that often comes up is, take care of your people and the profits will follow. Oftentimes, thinking of your employees as customers kind of requires a slightly different mindset than thinking of your employees simply as employees or simply as resources. Again, your employees are sort of integral partners that help you deliver your products and your services to your external customers. So if you want to think of them almost as a middle customer, then that's probably a good way to think of them. You have to get them bought in. You have to get them sort of energetic about the things that they're doing, and then they pass that energy along to the customers. And again, the profits sort of follow. External companies, just for definition's sake, can't leave them hanging. As we know, they're your customers who, at the end of the day, they're the end users of your products, not directly related to your organization.
Okay.
And so here we're sort of making the case for treating your employees as customers. In our experience, treating your employees as customers results in some of the best performance strategies to get the most out of your employees. In some respects, what we've seen is it helps humanize the business a little bit, where we oftentimes put a lot of, not unrightly so, we put a lot of attention on the needs of the external customers. But focusing on some of the internal customers too, shows the employees that your business can pivot the needs to the needs of your internal customers as well. And so, how did Laura and I go from pivoting, a strategy where the employees were treated a lot like employees to where now we're sort of treated like an internal customer base, and that is to employ some of the same listening strategies that you would use when you're building some of your external listening strategies.
Mm-hmm. And this is a really difficult shift in mindset, especially in tech firms where you're trying to make money, you're trying to optimize your products, create new ones, innovate. Really, it's all about the customer. It's about the bottom line. It's about what's the new feature that's coming out. And there's often a lot of chaos in tech firms, trying to organize around the products and optimizing that go-to-market strategy. So really shifting this culture of we got to look internally as well. We've seen a journey of it, Ben and I. It's been really difficult. I think one of the key things on this slide is, something that we had to do was not just look at the HR department, right? Like HR is HR and that's it. It's really about creating a stakeholder group outside of HR to really get on board with this concept and getting those leaders to really buy into this concept. So it takes a lot of networking, a lot of effort, and it's not just an HR tool, an HR listening channel. It's everybody's, and we all own it collectively in different parts of the organization, including those teams who actually are innovating and developing those products and bringing them to market and selling them to on the front end.
Exactly.
So how do we sort of transform this shift in mindset, as I had just mentioned? I mean, I think we really had to go back to the basic building blocks of organizational design. And with that really comes that North Star. And that starts with the mission statement and then values and what have you. And so in our journey, when we inherited this a little over 5 years ago, in order to listen to our internal employees, we only had 5 questions that our senior leadership team would ask biannually. And there was a lot of disorganization of other mini surveys going on in certain teams, but there was zero cohesion around what we're going to do with this high level data. Doesn't even mean anything. How do we operationalize it? There was really nothing. So we had to really put our heads together and say, how do we actually give people a voice? How do we give people a true channel and a platform where they know that something's going to happen? So we put our heads together and kind of built this mission, and it's based on action. I know we talk about action a lot when it comes to listening in any forum, but so the action piece we'll talk a little bit more about. It's complicated, but the first building block was something needs to happen with this data. And with that concept of something needs to happen, we had to really investigate also, what are we measuring? What is important to Indeed? What is our culture? What drives engagement? What drives our DNA? What makes us unique? We had to really dig deep into that and figure out how do we measure against those topics. And then what we had to do was we had to think about, like, this has to be practically operationalized somehow. To really to create that meaningful change across all different organizational levels. And again, to switch that mindset that this is not just owned by HR, this is owned by all. So again, it was really building a network of stakeholders, getting that buy-in from leadership to say, this data is important, this is an important listening channel, and here's your role in driving the action forward once we get those insights. We also had to really push our leadership to say, high-level insights is not going to get you anywhere. We need to better understand and investigate and get curious about our employees internally. And with that came a set of more detailed questions to really understand the drivers and the why behind things, behind high-level kind of insights. And we also introduced the concept of focus groups, one-on-one interviews, to really get deep into the rich insights of what is going on in our organization globally as we grew. So for us, it also became, it's not about the known. Okay, yes, we have to have consistent measurement strategies that we measure year on year to see the health of an organization. But it's also figuring out covert pockets where we're hearing grumblings of issues potentially that we can get ahead of with action and the right questions, and the right measurement strategy. If we have, our quantitative data, maybe for certain insights, it does make sense to go into focus groups and one-on-one interviews. So we get that full picture and we can give our leadership and our action groups the right set of insights to actually operationalize what we've learned. What we found coming to the external side of the house on the team that we're in now is that the missions are very similar. It is all about action, and it is about making sure that our data goes toward changing things for the better. So, Ben and I were laughing when we looked and we're comparing these mission statements. They're very much the same. And, we were excited about that. So here are the internal and external channels. So as we went on this journey, Ben and I, of comparing kind of listening strategies, what we also found here, yes, the mission statements were the same, but also many of the ways that we measure internal and external ways of listening is very similar too. And we want to give you all some ideas around what we do here at Indeed that we find innovative and interesting and unique, and it may align with what you all are doing as well. And hopefully we can give you some ideas as well. On the left-hand side, we'll talk about the internal. From this, as mentioned, we went from only measuring 5 really high-level questions to this robust list. And it took a lot of time and influence to get where we are today, but I can talk you through that journey. In terms of listening to our employees, this is a multi-pronged approach. We debunked the fact that it's your traditional engagement survey, or now, the buzzword is pulse surveys, or even daily surveys. I know some organizations do, like Amazon does 1 question a day. we felt that it has to be in multiple different channels to give people that platform and voice, depending on how comfortable they feel and the type of measurements we need to drive organizational change. So yes, we do have an engagement survey that is more detailed. We also have quarterly pulse surveys, depending on some lower scoring item questions and topics, and also some hot topics for our leaders in SLT. We have ongoing ad hoc surveys. One of those examples is, this hybrid life that we're leading post-pandemic. How do people feel? What are some changes we can look there, and some grumblings if there are any. We also have your standard HR processes around hiring, onboarding, and exit surveys. And we really do, we're trying to, I think a challenge, but it's really important for us to knit all of these data sets together where nothing is in silo, right? We're not just looking at the engagement survey in one snap point in time, but we're also weaving in, okay, so what's happening with their exit surveys as well, or onboarding as well, to make that experience best for new hires. So we have a robust teams here who build this story, this employee story, from the minute you walk in the door at Indeed to the moment that you leave. You have that journey here. And that's why this first bucket here is really important for us to measure that. We also offer focus groups depending on areas of concern that come out of these 4 main pillars of quantitative data. We also have office hours where we really are there to be on the ground and have those safe places where people can have a voice, and we get more detailed information. This is also a really good place where we get solutions to things, where we test solutions, where from the quantitative data, we may have some hypotheses, yes, but we don't want to design things for our employees internally without having them have a seat at the table and be part of that design factor. That is also very similar to what our product teams do to go to market external strategies for our products. So we take that same kind of design methodology internally as well for programming that we roll out. And that is the key for so many, for a lot of success, I think, in our programs. And again, it's getting buy-in from stakeholders as well, outside of HR, across the organization, to make sure we're designing together as one solution. We also have a Slack channel. I don't know how many of you use Slack, but here we did something quite daring that our CEO endorsed here. And it's a Slack channel where it's dare to share. So you can talk about anything and everything that comes to mind. Hot topics around career development emerge from this: salary, hybrid working arrangements, fear of the pandemic, a lot of anxieties there. And it's been quite successful. It's a really good listening tool. We get real live conversations and really good qualitative data and from this. I think this is a tough one because psychological safety is fraught and can be really challenging in organizations. So this is quite unique to Indeed. And that culture was really dictated from our senior leadership team and CEO to encourage to have a voice, and that any voice is okay. So I think that really has to be a top-down effort and part of the fabric of the DNA of the firm. Our CEO, again, really leads the charge here. He has biweekly syncs with the entire organization. It's a free forum where we can ask as many questions as we want. And again, people feel safe to do so. It's pretty amazing what people ask, quite intimate things. We also ask him personal questions. What do you like about your records? He's a big guitar player. So it really comes from the top is what we have seen here. And Ben, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the similarities to the external listening channels and what we've set up here internally?
Sure. So as Laura's kind of saying, for when we sort of transitioned over from like the engagement side to more of the external side, a lot of the same strategies that we employed for that sort of internal listening, we also employ for our external listening strategy too. So similarly, you'll see on the right side where we have that sort of our engagement surveys. We obviously have large NPS style surveys, quarterly pulse surveys. We have product surveys, multi-channel ad hoc product surveys like CSAT, Ask 'em. We're sort of closing the loop. So similar to and we'll sort of touch on this as we kind of go on. We're talking a little bit more about some of the action planning that we're using, but we're using some of these surveys to probe for customer pain points, kind of like what we'd be probing for sort of employee pain points, and then eventually using action planning to start closing the loop with those customers to figure out like what's going on, what can we do to help you, similar to what we would do with our employees. And we'll give you an example of something that we did. Focus groups, we have something kind of unique at Indeed where we have specific customer communities. So these communities are made up of our external stakeholders, big users of our product. And so we can always go to them to have sort of like these focus groups. But then again, it's a two-way channel, right? Or two-way street, I should say, where you have, we're going to the customers asking their opinions about products and services that we offer, but then they could also, again, sort of come to us. And so one of the things that we do have, not unlike other organizations, but we do have, customer feedback forms, which is essentially an ongoing suggestion box. So what do you like about our products? What do you find what are some of the pain points about using our products? What can we do to help make your experience of using Indeed's products and services all the more better? So in sort of closing the loop, again, we have, like the bi-weekly syncs with the CEO, we also have sort of broadcast interview between clients and senior leaders. And what that does is allows, so similarly to us as employees getting a little forum to go ask questions about things going on in the organization now of our senior leadership, now our customers have the same opportunity to do exactly the same thing. What's coming in products and services? What's new on the table? Can I get, different sort of strategies? Now our customers have the opportunity to do the same thing. And I think what we're sort of touching on here is like, we have this difference between, external, internal, external channels, but at the end of the day, we're using all of these sort of multimodal approaches to close the loop with not only our internal stakeholders, but also our external stakeholders. And I think that's we'll talk about action planning, but I think that's a big step. Like you do all of this work in order to measure, in order to, feel out pain points, in order to help make the experience better. But then what are you doing on the side to closing the loop? Data is only so good in a vacuum. We got to put it into action at some point.
Right.
We can jump to the next slide.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, as Ben said, we have the data. Now, what do we do? So it just, just in terms of what we did with, our internal listening groups, just want to give an example about that. So action planning with internal listening channels is like, we've all heard about it, and it's a must do, but in practice, it's really hard to do. It truly is. It takes really finding champions across the organization. And I think it has to come from top down, and our leadership and leaders and, SLT, VPs, down to directors, down to managers, really encouraging that change. People get their dashboards, they look at a report and they say, I now what, right? And what we found that with a lot of internal listening channels, a lot of that data is sensitive. It's complicated. It's emotional. It has to do with your day-to-day life here. It has to do with very sensitive topics like diversity, inclusion, and belonging fields. And it's not so easy to kind of take action versus like, I'd like to change a button from, the color purple to blue, right? So it takes a lot of effort and time and effort. But again, what we did here at Indeed was we took a multi-pronged kind of years-long approach to this. So the first piece was really educating our HR business partners, our HR partners on what is actually action planning. What does engagement mean? Why is it important to your organizations? Why should you then in turn be helping your leadership that you support? So that took a lot of training and effort. It took around a year, I would say, plus. We then, in that year, built champions and stakeholders across the organization in different senior leadership levels. We then kind of put the message out there too. Why is it important to look at this? Ben and I felt that the pandemic was actually a good thing for our space and internal listening channels. It really kind of propelled to the forefront even more. So the pandemic really helped solidify our plan and get those champions in place where listening had to happen as we were working across the world in such a fraught, distraught way. And so what happened here is we ended up creating like tiger teams for different topics and focus areas that came out of all of these listening channels we spoke about beforehand. And we elected leadership teams to those small tiger teams. And we posed it as an opportunity also for people to have career development. So for people who wanted to lead, get exposure in different ways of working, really amazing things actually came from people's careers being involved in these tiger teams. And then what happened was the tiger teams would report out on progress, figure out, is this a short-term or long-term win? We manage expectations to everybody that action takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, potentially. Sure, they're easy wins. You can do a different milk in your refrigerator, right, for coffee. But for really complicated things like, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, career development, performance management, these things take time. And so it's making sure that we're evolving on that scale and looking at it as a long-term product. But it's really getting those organized tiger teams and getting senior leadership buy-in, which has made action really more organized and impactful here. Ben, do you want to talk about the other?
Yeah, so we obviously turn the data into action plans, but one of the things that we think about when we're talking about sort of that internal versus external listening, use your external listening to sort of help, you productize some of that data and make changes to your goods and services. Well, when we did it with internal listening, it was kind of the same thing. The shift in the mindset is that sort of the products that you're selling are more products to your employees, and they're little more tangible, like in terms of things like career development, or in terms of next steps in what you want to do with your job, etc. So by creating these sort of tiger teams and creating these sort of pillars that we did, it was essentially like creating whole new product strategies that we have to turn around, sell to the organization as like, this is something that you should be doing, like a product that you should be selling to your customers, and then, sort of take it from there. So that's something that we certainly did with the internal side. So we formed partnerships within the organization. We created our pillars, or sort of our products that we were selling, and then sort of went from there. But then also, again, sort of to go back to that closed loop, right? So we have these products and services that are out on both sides, but we obviously are going to end up with some sort of pain points going forward. So one of the things that you always have to do is you always have to touch base and re-measure. So did the changes in the products, i.e. like the services you're providing for your employees, or the products and services you're providing for your external clients, produce the change in the behavior you wanted? Are we seeing, and in the case of the internal side, it was, are we seeing our retention rates go up? Are we seeing our satisfaction rates go up? Are people feeling satisfied in their career developments? One of the things that our CEO says is, find your next job at Indeed. And so making career development sort of that pillar. Are we seeing more people finding their next job at Indeed? But then also on the external side, again, you still have to do the closed loop. You still have to bring it back home. Did the changes that you made to your product eventually produce the changes in the behavior that you want? Are customers more satisfied? are we seeing less customer churn? Are we seeing more revenue come in? In the case of the internal side, it's kind of interesting, talk about revenue on the external side, but then on the internal side, our revenue numbers were always basically like, what are the engagement scores? Like that was our ROI. What are our retention scores? That was our return on investment. So on both sides, you have, again, the listening and then the product changes and then the ROI on both the internal and then the external side.
Yes. So we want to dive into a case study around, just to operationalize all of what we've been discussing. So in terms of the internal listening side of the house, to bring kind of home the internal and external theme here is, so our mission statement here at Indeed is we help people get jobs. And we were so focused on that, infusing that into all of our products. Interestingly, it really was only a few years ago where we really brought this same mission statement internally as well. And it's essentially, we have a phrase that our SLT members call like drink your own champagne, and kind of productize it internally as well and live that mission here as well. If we're saving the world for so many others, we should also be looking and doing that internally. So there's been a big push, over the past, I would say 3 years around this topic internally. And it came to the burning platform due to multiple reasons. First, of what I just mentioned. Second is, we've been measuring the question, I have opportunities to learn and grow at Indeed since 2017, and that started slipping. And we did find that it was a key driver of many different factors of our culture and engagement here. So it was a key metric to really look at. So on the quant side, that really checked out with our story as we unfolded this story. And then also throughout all of our listening channels, or Dare to Share on Slack, on all of the multiple, CEO biweekly meetings, a career came up all of the time. And so it really became a saturated theme for us to focus on, and definitely became a burning platform and quite clear. We also found that became alarming over time as we analyzed the data, is that in the exit, hiring, and onboarding surveys, development was really the number one reason why individuals were coming to Indeed, because of that mission statement externally that we really wear very proudly. And it really was the number one reason why folks and employees were leaving Indeed. And so when the labor market became really tight, especially during the pandemic, this just again became magnified and a really important retention tool for Indeed. So what we did was, this became a full effort across the organization. This again was not just an HR sponsored go ahead. Yes, HR was involved, but there were training teams that got involved from other parts of the organization, leaders with different types of mindsets, ways of thinking, who came to the table and really developed strong action plans. Careers in tech are really divergent. We have sales and CS on the front line, which have a different skill set versus those who are behind the computer, and engineers and product developers, UX, user experience researchers like Ben and I. And it's really different ways of thinking about what does a career mean here. It can be complicated. One of the most beautiful things Indeed did is they take a chance on people who have similar skill sets internally, just as we do in our external world, and give those people those platforms where you may not be in the perfect role or department, but they do take a chance on you becoming potentially an engineer. And how we do that is we really built and operationalized a very strong internal mobility team, kind of career development, coaching, mentoring, the ability to invest in yourself with trainings internally. Of really good training teams here, as well as invest externally. But I think the key there was making sure that there was a strong internal mobility team. That's not often the case in organizations where that happens. And so all of this came to fruition over the past couple of years, and they've been in baby steps, but it's really made a big impact. And those scores have gotten higher, and people feel like they can actually find their next career at Indeed. I mean, even Ben and I are products of that, right? We came from internal listening, and they took a chance on us to prove our skill sets, and even showcase, even in our presentation today, that there's so much crossover between internal and external products and go-to-market strategies and ways of listening and influencing decisions. So we're really proud of this career development journey here and our contribution to that. And it's, again, we thought of this as a product, right? This is just as it's go to market externally, it's go to market internally. We iterate, we brought focus groups and people to the table to make sure we were designing it correctly. And we're always have a focus on a lens on, well, how do we innovate? How do we make this better? So it's always tweaking. And we'd like to give you another case study around what we've done externally here too.
Yeah, exactly. So sort of talking about what we've done sort of internally in some of the multimodal listening channels that we use for, internally growing that learn and grow sort of pillar. One of the second case study is obviously like the external listening, right? In this case, it was a change in payment structure. And so what ended up happening here was that a company we were working with decided how to change some of the ways the customers pay for their services. It resulted in an upcharge of customers based on perceived increase in some of the quality of services. Again, using that multimodal listening channels where we have open channels of feedback, we have our large surveys, we have focus groups. Before sort of the changes even fully implemented, you can already start to see maybe some bubblings underneath the surface of things that may or may not be going on. Because maybe I should back up here a little bit. One of the things that helps us certainly is that using those multimodal listening channels certainly allows you to anticipate problems that are coming down the road before they really happen. And so you can have your feelers out there for months in advance because your ears are always turned on. You're always listening to what your customers are saying. You're not necessarily placed into a reactive situation where, oh no, we made this change, now our customers are upset. We can sort of preempt some of this. That being said, after some of the preemption, some of the dissatisfactions were bubbling to the surface, this company decided to field a large survey to sort of confirm. So again, it's that large sort of like satisfaction survey. Hey, we're hearing these things. Are these things really real? You can get a lot of good data off of surveys, but I think one of the things, again, sort of that the thing about quantitative surveys is it always answers the what, not necessarily the why. And so turning to customer communities specifically, we always know that through focus groups, like we got a good idea of the what through our quantitative surveys, but now we can sort of probe a little deeper for the why. And that you can find that through focus groups a little bit better than you can from just an open text on your survey. And so some of the actions that were taken from this sort of external listening was that obviously we have all these channels open. We know the multitude of pain points from customers, and because of the way in which the listening strategy was set up, we can bubble up things with incredible speed. It doesn't take you a billing cycle and drop in revenue to figure out like, hey, stuff is going on. This company, because of the listening strategy and some of the data that was provided back, they're making substantial changes to the way the pricing model works. And a large portion of that was due to the feedback heard across different channels. So again, kind of summing up in both of these, you have sort of a ground up sort of building an internal listening and resulting in a sort of productization in terms of like learning and growing and finding your next career. But this is your more typical sort of external listening strategy. But one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that both employ the very, very similar strategies. So it's not like you need some sort of secret sauce on the internal side to figure out like what your employees need from you as a business. Again, you don't need a secret sauce on the external side to figure out what your customers need from your products and services.
Yeah, and all these multiple listening channels, again, what Ben had said, it's like we can anticipate strategically versus be reactive and create panic through these like varying listening channels that we've developed internally and externally. And I think the future for Indeed, as we look forward, both for internal and external, is how do we more strategically create those listening touch points throughout, building a product from inception, from ideation, inception, design, and then go to market. What are those ideal touch points with the what, with quant as we layer it on, or with the why and with the qual? And how does that balance and that shift and pull really work as we map that out for our products internally and externally? What is ideal and when and how? And it's easier said than done. It's not easy to operationalize something like that. And with that, I think it's not about working in silos. Like you do have to really have, a well-oiled machine in terms of having the right stakeholders in the room to make sure, things are rolled out properly. So with that, does anyone have any questions or want to elaborate around what you're doing internally? Does it resonate or not? Anything that we can help with?
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or through the YouTube chat, but one question that I do have, maybe some folks are starting to gather their thoughts and typing now, but I'd like to know more about how you engaged internal employees and leadership. So if there's anything that you can share, tips and tricks, or just some of the initiatives to get some of that buy-in internally with employees and then escalating and taking things up to the next level with leadership as well, that would be really helpful for us.
Yeah. Ben, do you want to go?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did to sort of get internal buy-in is you could always attach whatever your, let's say, engagement scores to like a particular outcome. So if your company has, let's say, retention metrics that are pretty important, and you want to retain, like, let's say your top talented individuals, obviously then tying back sort of the fundamental sort of engagement scores back to like retaining some of your top employees, that's pretty standard. But then that helps you generate some of the buy-in from leadership. And as you start to go in and say, like, well, hey, your folks are leaving because of, let's say, managerial issues. And then you say, well, what specifically is about manager? On a 5-question survey, you're not necessarily going to figure out like, well, what is about managers, what is about career development that are causing these people to leave? And so then that's when you say, okay, now it's time for us to dig further. We're going to have to launch a little bit bigger of a survey. We're going to have to gather more data. We're going to have to start building sort of more of the programs to go get the questions answered that you want. And so tying your programs back to any sort of, looking at key root causes of things that are going on within your organization it has been, in our experience, a pretty easy way to generate buy-in.
Yeah. And it's to build, it's not just about reporting and saying, here are the numbers. It's about building a story around, to what Ben had just said, answering the questions of why. And I think that was really important, because that why had never been explained to Indeed 5 years ago when we started. They didn't have that data. And it was us, getting curious, investigating, getting to know our organization, our people, what ticks, what doesn't, on a macro level, and then on a micro level and even local level internationally, what are those nuances and what can we do about it? So I think just by building the story really helped. And again, just building, this goes without saying, it's quite obvious, like building relationships from the top down, but also having, there were some grassroots efforts at Indeed too, and not like ignoring those voices too. So it's kind of like bringing your grassroots to the senior leadership, and you're kind of that middleman essentially, as well. You have to play that role.
Thank you. So I have seen 2 new questions come through. The first is, apologies if I missed it, do you measure DEI metrics? And if so, have you seen a change over time with programs implementation?
Yes.
Yes. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go, Ben. I'm good.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'll talk about it just strategically, and then Ben talk about it a bit more quantitatively. But yes, so DE&I has been a huge effort for us. So with that, again, we productized this as well. I think it's a really good example. So thank you for the question. We did measure it on surveys. We did, deeper dives into DE&I metrics, and of course, belonging, psychological safety, et cetera. But with that, the data just wasn't enough. So what Indeed did a couple of years ago was really invest in the infrastructure of building that team out. So it's a very well-oiled machine now with dedicated members to certain business groups. We're looking at DE&I not just from a survey perspective, but on like macro level, big systemic processes. So they're looking at DE&I and the performance processes, at what is talent development? How does that factor into compensation? How does that factor into building our products externally to folks? So DE&I just isn't a survey metric, and belonging is one tiny piece of that huge network that we have. And making sure that we have equitable hiring practices in our products that are go to market, that our customers are investing in, is like critical. It's at the heart and soul of everything that we design. And that philosophy of design is mapped into everything internally. Training, all those other things that I had mentioned. Has it moved the needle? I'll pass that on to Ben.
Yeah, so as Laura was saying, have we seen a change in those metrics over time with the program implementation? Yes, we have seen an increase in DEI scores as a result of the change in that program implementation. One of the things that we always do is anytime we go to measure sort of DEI scores across our organization, you always have to make sure whatever you're measuring is psychometrically sound and you're getting the right data that you need. And so once we did that, we were able to help DEI build the sort of programs around the things that they wanted to do. And so we were very intentional with the way we structured our surveys to measure the outcomes that they wanted to measure. And so as a result of the way that the programs were implemented, we did start to see an increase in DEI scores over time. As Laura was sort of mentioning earlier, each part of the organization gets their own sort of look into what's going on in their organization. They can compare themselves to other parts of the organization. And then it creates a situation where, yes, you have programs implemented, but then also leaders can reach out to other leaders and to see what they're doing for DEI within their own org. So it makes it a little bit more collaborative versus, working on it just in a silo.
Thank you. The next question is, how closely do you work with the Indeed Insights team?
So Indeed Insight, great question. And difficult to answer because okay. So Indeed is a data-driven company. So there are insights team all over the place. And that is one of the struggles for Indeed, is how do we make those insights less siloed? And how do we create like more of a strategic storyline for certain initiatives? So our particular team, our arm, we are an insights team. So Ben and I run a research panel here, which I think is quite unique. Organizations like credit cards have it. I know Amex has a really, strong research panel. LinkedIn has a research panel too. And what am I saying with research panel? So it's basically a self-elected group of customers who say, we are willing to give you feedback and information around research topics that Ben and I are investigating. So Ben and I get mandates from our senior leadership teams and product teams here internally, and a variety of different questions. So we work very closely with product marketing on go-to-market strategies, on even marketing language. We've worked very closely with design features of products. We've worked philosophically on high-level discussions like what do our customers think about ChatGPT and that disruption in their hiring process, end-to-end hiring process. So Ben and I work on a variety of different types of topics. And when we get a question or a hypothesis, what we do then is we get to the root issues of what are we trying to gain. And then we build a discussion guide. We try to figure out our methodology. Is it quant? Is it qual? Is it a combination? Unique ways of gathering the data. I mean, I can go on and on about this. And then we go to our Indeed Insiders research panel. And we say to folks, are you interested in XYZ topic and talking to us? We then put out a poll, or we have one-on-one or focus group discussions, and we build a story with that data. And where that data goes is it goes to sway a product decision. It goes to influence a go-to-market marketing strategy and wording of things. So we are an insights team among many here. But Ben and I work on like kind of pretty high level strategic type of discussions. And do you want to say how we partner with other insights teams, Ben, and how we kind of bring it home?
Yeah. So one of the things is that in terms of insights team with Indeed, we're always very collaborative with one another. So we might have access to the panel through Indeed Insiders, but then other insights teams might have questions that they would like our insiders to answer. And so we're always pretty good about partnering with other insights team to create sort of a holistic look, because we might have, more product focused researchers on like the very mundane portions of the product that might want to know, if I implement this button here, how is that going to affect, perceptions of this thing that I'm trying to do. And so partnering across organization allows us to, again, sort of create that different listening channels where you're tackling the same problem from multiple angles. So while we generally work on some of the high level stuff, we do partner with teams who work on some of the more, focused things about our products and services.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Sorry, it's a little.
Great, thank you. I am not seeing any further questions on our YouTube channel or in our chat. So Laura, Ben, thank you so much for your time, for presenting. This was very interesting, engaging, and very helpful. I'm sure our audience really appreciated it. And if it's okay, I'm sure also people will reach out to you through LinkedIn or other sources to make that connection with you.
Yes.
So thanks again.
Absolutely.
Please reach out. We'd love to help. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right.